He's starting now, so give it like 5 seconds.
Okay.
I like everyone's turtlenecks today. Yours is kind of a turtleneck, but I figured that we should all...
Austin can't see us, but okay.
We are live.
We're live.
Yeah.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Show Me the Meaning, Wisecrack's movie podcast.
Show me the meaning!
My name is Jared, and I'm joined today with the Wisecrack crew. We got Austin.
Yo!
And Jacob.
Hello, hello.
And joining us again, it's been quite a while, is Helen.
Hey, everybody.
So today we're talking about The Inventor, Out for Blood in Silicon Valley, the 2019 film directed by Alex Gibney. This just came out this week on HBO about the whole Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes debacle. Let's go ahead and get some first impressions. What do you think of the documentary? And give me an idea of your general awareness of this event. Let's start with Austin, since it's been a while. What do you think?
Yeah. So first of all, I just need to say I love Alex Gibney as a documentary filmmaker. I think he's kind of, you know, if there are some documentaries that are kind of like run and gun, guerrilla style shooting, and his always are very polished. He's kind of like the Fincher of documentaries in my mind. You know, it's very clean, very precise. His stories are always really managed. I love him as a documentary filmmaker for the most part. I didn't like this documentary from a filmic or cinematic perspective. I kind of didn't really find it that informationally stimulating. I think anything you want to learn, you can find out by watching a couple of YouTube videos or listening to The Dropout, the podcast series. And maybe that was my problem. Maybe I learned a little too much, so there were no revelations to me. There was nothing profound that was revealed about Elizabeth, about the company, about some of the fraudulent behaviors. There was nothing really profound that I felt that the film delivered to me. And I kind of thought some of the graphics, like the computer graphics, were a little chintzy. I don't know, man. It kind of felt like they were like, hey, Alex, we need you to rush this out. And you got 6 months to do it. That's what it felt. It felt just very rushed, and I don't know.
But why now? Is it now more relevant than it would be in like 5 months?
I've got a theory. I just wanted to speak like Elizabeth, but I've got a theory as to why now is important.
Okay, let's hear it.
Yeah.
It's going to be very hard for me to keep this baritone. She's much lower than I ever have been in my whole life. But I think there's something about what's happening right now is sort of the focus on biographies of very bad people. So you had recently the R. Kelly documentary on Lifetime, and we've just had the Michael Jackson documentary on HBO. And I think it was important to follow up with another Fire Festival, of course. And now it's very important to follow up with another bad person documentary. So I think HBO is also desperate for ratings. You have to think about how they stack up against Netflix that kind of has access to every film ever. I sound like I'm a wrestler here.
Yeah, actually, you are evoking Elizabeth. I'm kind of getting into it.
Are you getting into it? So I think it's very important that we focus on why the timing is so important now, because HBO is trying to change the world. And if you're trying to change the world, you get documentaries like this made fast.
Jesus.
So thank you very much.
Yeah. You know what, brother? I think you're absolutely right, though. I think that's it. It's, you know, because we look at it now from the public and we don't know when films are going to be released, but they all know what's in production because they had scripts banded about. They're talking with other people, so they know what's coming out. So they know what's hot when.
I'll bet you a quarter.
Right. They needed to capitalize on the kind of current historical moment with our obsession with the examination of biographies of like fraudulent people, bad people, et cetera.
That's right. Yeah, I think that you got to think really the context here is HBO has just sold to AT&T. They've always been the people for the best like event television, and they've lost that opportunity as Netflix is coming in and flooding the market and buying things like Roma and buying the best movies and getting great documentaries made. So HBO's got to do everything in their power to get people to tune in. And Michael Jackson's documentary was a total event. It got people to tune in like crazy.
For better or worse.
For better or worse, but it was a total event. You got to think about the demand for that movie was very high, and they released it, 2 or 3 or 4 weeks after Sundance. So they struck the iron while it was hot. And this is another movie. But I agree that it felt very rushed. Not that you asked my opinion yet, but it felt like a rushed film that didn't really have it wasn't a story that I could follow very easily compared to, I read the John Carreyrou book, and that was a much easier, it was more of a procedural, and you were seeing it in in order. You were seeing the story unfold like in chronological order, and then seeing the deceit and the deception mount and escalate in a way that in this documentary, Jared and I were saying, like, it just feels like, wait, she's 19. The next second, she's 30. Yes. The next second, we're back at the lab. The next minute, Walgreens is out. Like, what? What's the timeline?
Yeah, the timeline's real weird.
It really lacked a cohesive narrative in that way. And it was, I haven't read the biography, but I remember following, John Carreero's kind of as the drip, drip, drip of information came out. And that was fascinating. If you really want to go back and kind of see as things were happening, it's, just reading his Wall Street Journal articles and getting that little bit of information at the time. And it's like, oh, where is this going?
I wasn't around for that part. So, like, I wasn't following Elizabeth. Excuse me, I forgot my voice.
Yeah.
But I wasn't following her. I'm going to drop it in a second. But I wasn't following the whole story. I wasn't like obsessed with her. I wasn't following the story of Theranos. So I picked it up way after the fact. Once I remember I read an article on an email or something came through saying how Theranos fell from like a $9 billion company to worth nothing and to bankrupt.
Yeah.
And
less
like,
than nothing.
Less than nothing. I remember that article. Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, whoa. It was like the day that the company dissolved that I read that article. And then that's when I got interested in Bad Blood. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. And so I wasn't there for seeing it as it happened. Like, that must have been a crazy ride.
Well, if you want a treat, go back and read the articles because it really is something. The first one that they actually showed in the documentary, and I didn't realize. I think they said that she was being inducted to Harvard's board. Right.
Board of trustees or
not
board of
something.
Trustees,
some kind of honorary distinction, and that article was like, it was pretty damning, and she did nothing, but she had this glow of the celebrity CEO that we are so kind of fawn over now. And I think everybody was kind of drinking the Kool-Aid with her. She was fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
I was.
A lot of Kool-Aid was being passed around.
All the Kool-Aid.
A lot of Kool-Aid.
Everybody drinking the Kool-Aid.
Well, hold on. Austin, are you done?
Sorry,
yeah.
We kind of cut you off there.
I am never done, but I'm gonna stop.
Okay.
I think that's it.
Blame Jacob.
I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I just feel like if you're trying to change the world, you got to step in and do whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes.
All right, Jacob.
We'll unpack some of the themes, obviously, as we go into the main segment. At the outset, I just want to say how kind of like bummed out I am at Gibney. Because I love him as a filmmaker, and I just felt that this had no teeth. That's my kind of initial takeaway from the film.
Okay, Jacob, what'd you think?
Similar. Same thing. I thought the documentary was not great. I found it entertaining enough. I actually really liked the graphic scenes, like the little graphics and motion graphics and animations and stuff. I thought having someone like Dan Ariely on, like the behavioral therapist or behaviorist on, was cool. Like that whole the dice experiment was fascinating for me to get like this sort of just a different perspective that I did not get in the John Carreyrou book. The book, I will say, to me, maybe it ruined the documentary. I'm not sure how much. I guess you said you already knew that, Austin. You already had watched the or listened to the podcast and learned about the story.
Yeah.
But to me, the book just did a much better job of laying out the story, of getting into detail, into places like the Sonny character, who is quite pathological and very paranoid. He had a sexual relationship with Elizabeth Holmes that was kind of fun and interesting to explore. There was more detail of the Tyler Schultz and George Schultz, like that relationship with the grandson and his grandfather. That was interesting. That also unfolded more of the kind of mania and craziness around that whole lawyer situation that they had, and there's a lot more espionage feeling, kind of sort of a feeling. The Walgreens project was more elaborated on, and then overall, it's the whole thing. Like I said, kind of played more like a procedural. It just felt just easier to follow along. So I thought the book did a better job, and because it was investigative and it was once the lid already kind of got blown off of the story, that's where the book picks up. But with that being said, I thought the documentary does a better job at part two. Once it kind of hits the second half, once you get into the John Carreyrou kind of part, I thought that was fun. And then it was cool to see Elizabeth Holmes. The book, you don't get that. You don't get all of those moments, those little bits of her in the interview, and not being able to tell a personal secret was awesome. Or my favorite part, I think one of my favorite parts, I was telling Jared this earlier, that we didn't spoil it, but I thought it was fun, that the Fortune magazine writer was just and then he's speechless. He's like, what? What the fuck? Why aren't you?
He was kind of devastated.
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
he was devastated.
He was broken. A broken man. A broken man.
That was to me the most dramatic point. Is that he because he was the person that really kind of like pushed her into the limelight,
Yeah.
right? With the Fortune magazine cover and everything like that. And so there's a sense of guilt. There's a sense that he felt swindled. But the fact that he was speechless and then all of a sudden he just starts swearing. And you're like, yeah, because sometimes you can't say anything profound and you have to just say fuck.
I thought this is
Either that or maybe he's secretly invested.
Yeah, right. I was like, this is a man. I was like, this guy's like
possible.
repressing his anger. I was like, this guy is like saying the most like horrible things, but so pleasantly. He's like, and that's why she's just a freaking fucking bitch. And I'm like, dude, have some anger behind those words, man.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah.
I thought it was. It didn't give me anything new, too much. Nothing. I wouldn't watch it again, I guess, is what I'd say. But I did enjoy watching it. I'm glad the story's out to more people. I think it's fascinating. And of course, in this thread of entrepreneurs who are bad people, this was a cool one. Like this was yet another in the canon, which I thought was cool. So
Yeah. All right, Helen, what about you?
I mean, I'm not going to add to the diversity of opinions here. I was left wanting more. I watched it 1.5 times because I fell asleep. I'm not going to lie. Toward the end, right after the CMS stuff, I fell asleep. And I think it's like you said. You read the biography. You know, it gave you what there was just a lot left out. It was very cool to see Elizabeth. The scene where she's jumping in the bouncy house after they've had that was pretty mind blowing to me. Yeah, just the fact that they had cameras on her. You know, just that there was so much footage of her where it was very clearly they're documenting her as this. You know, this goddess, this hero, and she's, you know, she loves it. She loves that light, and that was interesting to see. For sure.
Especially with the timing. Like again, she just had this scathing article, and she's going to Harvard, or she's
just all along.
Yeah.
Just she just absorbed all of that kind of celebrity CEO culture, but that was it. You know, it's like a great idea and this, you know, something that's going to change the world. And that's something, you know, it's just very Silicon Valley, going to change the world. Everybody's there with a crazy idea, but there's no depth to it. The work.
And you worshipped
there.
her, right? Like you
I
used
don't
to
know
love
if
her.
I realized, I mean, you know, it's like,
As
maybe I'm
a
backtracking
woman in
now a little
science.
bit. Like, yeah.
But you said, I remember like
she was very impressive.
4 or 5 months ago, you were like, oh yeah, she was great.
She was kind of a hero, yeah. I wanted to be, I think everybody who was kind of, or probably not everybody, but I know for myself, I'm like, you know, God, that's something to aspire to. But then I realized, you know, maybe if I'd heard her talk once or twice instead of just reading what the media said about her.
The articles looked really impressive.
The articles looked really impressive, and that's what the media does best, you know, is kind of takes those people and glorifies them. We see it over and over again, and she even spoke a little bit of truth in the course of the documentary, but we can get to that later. But like I said, it was cool to see her. But I was bored. I really was kind of frustrated that they didn't get the perspective of I think they had two physicians, the one from Stanford, and then the other one was an ND. I didn't know who
she was. It's like a practicing doctor. It seemed like.
Okay, yeah.
What is ND? Helen?
Was it? I actually don't know.
Oh, ND
I should have looked it up.
Oh, I thought it was MD.
Well, it was ND, but I thought it might have been a typo first. But I didn't look her up, which was stupid. I should do that in a second. But
I can look that up, but no worries.
No, I wanted more technical explanation as for why what she was doing couldn't work. Could it have worked if it had been bigger? Could it have worked, you know, if there had been less tests, if we'd taken longer to, you know, make something like this happen? I mean, but she was rushed because it's, you know, she wanted to be the celebrity. That was what I really took away from it. That was the whole point. And that speaks to something larger in our culture. But let's move on.
I actually quite liked it. So I am going to give the differing opinion. I
Right.
did not. I feel like I'm the ideal audience because I didn't know much about the event. Jacob had told me a little bit. I knew that it was a hoax. But I thought it was good. And the reason why I think it was good is I understand where you guys are coming from, where you followed the whole thing, you know about the whole mythology, whereas I knew nothing. And I feel like I got enough. I feel like I get something. But this is a piece of entertainment. Gibney made a piece of entertainment. And I just kind of look at it through that lens, and he had to find an angle, and I liked his angle on the whole story because the thing is already too long. It's already 2 hours.
Yeah,
he's not going to make a 4-hour version.
Right.
I mean, maybe he would with HBO.
Michael Jackson.
Yeah, the Michael Jackson thing. But I liked his angle a lot. I mean, his angle is essentially that this woman sold people on a very appealing, albeit false, story a la her idol and the namesake of her product, Thomas Edison, and that we all frame our lives through stories. And I just think with all this discussion around how news media is communicated to us through narrative and how we consume reality as a narrative and all the ramifications of that, I think it was a pretty poignant angle to take.
He did do a good job of Edison. Obviously, is the namesake of her product. Edison is this hero of hers, just like Steve Jobs was. And then the whole film was sort of in that lens of like, just like Edison as a magician, she was trying to do the same thing, and it kind of kept drawing that parallel throughout the whole film.
And I guess the whole thing was like, so how does she con all these supposedly smart, ultra powerful people? Because, and I got to give a shout out to Mike Burns, who wrote our kayfabe video, because we're all marks for a world we want to believe in, and the Elizabeth Holmes story is too good not to believe. But anyway, I want to go into a recap, and then I have some questions for, I guess, Jacob and Helen and Austin, whoever knows more about this than I do, because I guess to your point, there are a lot of things that I found confusing, most specifically the timeline. They say she started the company when she was 19, then say, I don't know, when she raised the first $400 million and then the second $400 million on the Walgreens thing, and then she's all of a sudden 35. I don't really know how
she's
that
like
works.
Bill and Ted's, man. She's just traveling around.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so recap. So 19-year-old wonderkin Elizabeth Holmes drops out of Stanford to create Theranos, a medical tech company that touts the ability to run the whole gamut of blood tests in a computer-sized box with only a single drop of blood. Problem is, this is impossible. But that doesn't stop the veritable army of wealthy and influential people captivated by her story and her personality from throwing money at her. Politicians, ex-military, and Silicon Valley's wealthiest investors line up to support her project. Many years, $900 million, and one failed partnership with Walgreens later, it becomes evident that Elizabeth's technology never worked. She had been lying, and she was constantly sprinting to achieve the impossible. The company's valuation goes from $9 billion to zero overnight, and Elizabeth and her COO, who she had been engaged in a romantic affair with, plead not guilty to charges of fraud and conspiracy. End of documentary.
Did you get? Did it mention the romantic relationship?
It did mention it. Not in much detail.
Yeah.
But before we go on, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors over at Twillery. Twillery is shirts. Everyone needs a shirt, and you need a shirt almost every day. I think, like, we could say every day. Twillery are dress shirts that are comfortable, easy to care for, look great, and fit perfectly. They are performance shirts. They breathe really, really well. They don't sweat. Most performance shirts are all polyester and feel a little bit plasticky, but Twillery's are mostly cotton with an incredible hand feel. They're easy care, wrinkle-free, no scratchy tags. You can save more money when you bundle. And so there's free shipping in the U.S. and free returns. So Show Me the Meaning listeners can get $25 off their first shirt order by going to Twillery.com/showme and entering the promo code SHOWME. Once again, Show Me the Meaning listeners, $25 off for their first shirt order by going to Twillery.com/showme and entering the promo code SHOWME at checkout. And now back to the show.
Heyo.
All right, guys, I got a couple of questions. So I guess mostly for Jacob or whoever knows the most about this. One thing I never could figure out was, is she actually a competent or extremely talented scientist, or was it just all bullshit?
Helen might know more than I do, but it sounds like it's all
Well, she only went to school for a year.
Yeah, and
so I read a couple reports that said that she actually couldn't have the knowledge about phlebotomy and various things like that she claimed that her product was going to be able to explore. So in a sense, there was an element where she was projecting more about her scientific or medical expertise than she actually was able to realize.
And right at the beginning, I mean, they asked her, do you consider yourself a scientist, a technologist, or an entrepreneur? And she's, I'm an entrepreneur. I mean, she studied engineering. I don't think she studied the biomedical sciences, which is, not unimpressive at all. I'm not saying, but she wasn't a biologist. She was not a phlebotomist.
But doesn't she have? Didn't the documentary allude to the fact she has patents?
Well, she was developing a patent which was physically impossible. Which that Stanford professor is like, this is not possible. I'm not going to help you sign on this. This can't be done this way. Okay. And she refuses to listen. And she got the patent done anyway. She had 2 patents to her name.
I think she did.
And a couple more later in the company.
With other people, yeah. She definitely had that one. I'm actually, I haven't looked into that and see, like, how did she pull that off?
I guess, like, I think you can.
I think there's a really simple way, Jared, to think about this. It's science fiction. That's literally what this is. You know how science fiction is few minutes into the future, devising ideas based on imaginative speculation. You've got like a machine that can materialize anything that you want, and so you can just snap your fingers and you've got food in Star Trek, right? It's something similar. She was 5 minutes into the future, 15 minutes into the future. And so that's, I think, a way to think about this. Like, just because she didn't have the expertise doesn't mean that she didn't have enough knowledge. Like, I could right now go get a patent for some sort of like biotech software or something
let's like use
that.
the holodeck from Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I have enough knowledge, like a cursory knowledge of science in some various subfields, where I could go and I could be like, oh, that's kind of cool, and it's not on the market right now. I could go get a patent for something.
Yeah, like you can get a
sense.
patent for something that doesn't actually exist yet.
Yeah.
100%.
That's the whole idea. It's like you're kind of just you're devising and patenting the flow, like the way that it will work, the method in which it'll work. And this was an idea of like
Right.
having a device that you would patch, it would monitor and dispense medication at the same time, which was physically impossible at that size. Like maybe it's a nanotechnology of some kind.
Right.
But
Which sounds fantastic.
it sounds cool.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds amazing. Do you know who Kevin Kelly is, the founder of Wired?
That's.
Now I know that he's
Yeah.
the founder of Wired.
Yeah.
But wait, what did
Okay,
he
yeah.
do?
So he wrote a book a couple of years ago, I think in 2016, called The Inevitable, and it's about these 12 trends in technology that he says are going to revolutionize the world. And one of the ones that he actually spends a little bit of time talking about, I don't know if it was based, I don't know if he mentions Theranos in the book, but he basically says that like pharmacists are going to become obsolete in the future because the whole process is going to be automated and streamlined into your room, where you're just going to stick your finger in a machine. It's going to prick it, and it's going to do a diagnostic check, and it's going to tell you what you need in terms of like vitamins or whatever in that given day, and then it's going to make you the precise pill that is going to be good for you in that moment, right? So it's stuff like that I think there's an active. It's not just sci-fi in the bad sense that it's like, oh, she's just crazy and fanciful, but it's speculation, and I think in that sense that's how we kind of have to view her patents and how she viewed herself as an entrepreneur.
Sure.
She was like a scientific speculator.
Yeah.
I've got a friend now who's got a girlfriend, and I said, what does she do? And he said, oh, she's working for a company that does like microdosed blood samples. And I'm like, oh, like Theranos? And he's like, yeah, it's like Theranos, but it's like the real one.
I think there's been a couple
This is
of
right
these
now.
since-
I know, but
Yeah.
it's like kind of in a way like a doomed joke of an industry right now. But it is possible, or it is headed in that direction. I'm sure.
Uh-huh.
Well,
The
you know,
science
the
of like a
Schultz
couple
grandson, he works for a diagnostics company now, a startup that's doing something similar.
I think he's
Small
the
amounts of
CEO.
blood.
Tyler Schultz, you said? Isn't he the
Tyler, yeah.
Yes, he's the CEO or something. I think he may have founded it, didn't he? Maybe not.
I think, yeah, it's some startup, and I know he's involved, and it's basically like Theranos, but more quote unquote realistic. So,
And I mean, just to be clear, I feel like that, her lack of she was a visionary, I think, for sure. I mean, and that just because she didn't have that background, she was able to make connections. It didn't preclude her from doing great things, That's just
Clearly, it
all
was
the
an
other shit that
exciting
came after.
opportunity for people. It's
Yeah.
funny because to me, I don't think of it as like that revolutionary, but I just don't. I guess I'm not in the world of biomedical engineering, and I'm not in that world of what a big industry Quest Diagnostics is, and this whole world of blood testing. So to me,
Right.
it
Well, I
sounds
mean,
like it
well,
doesn't
the
sound like that
issue
big a
is-
difference, but I guess it is huge. Obviously, it was enough to get people just so excited.
Jacob, think about this. Like, instead of ever having to go to the doctor, you would just be able to go to, eventually, you'd probably have one in your house, but you'd just be able to go to the local drugstore, get a finger prick, and then get your own test results in an hour.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you would be able to, I mean, it's basically the culmination of biopolitical management from a phlebotomy perspective. But it's like, then you can have all your test results at that moment. So you know everything about what's going on in your body. And so they're viewing it not as sort of something that reacts to sick people, but something that's proactive,
Yeah.
Well, this goes more to, and what's my first talking point, something I already brought up, was story. It's not only is the story of Elizabeth Holmes, this woman in
Wunderkind, yeah.
tech who is rising the ranks and has this revolutionary idea, but she was able to tell the story of Theranos, and that is so important when it comes to investors or anything like that. You basically have to captivate them. It's not only the media, it's not only it's literally, how do I sell this vision? And this vision is best sold using narrative.
and they believed in her story. you know, almost more so than the story of what she was doing. Like, they believed in her as a leader.
Yeah, I love one of the parts in the documentary where there's this guy, I don't even know who it is, but he says that her grandfather was an entrepreneur and her uncle has a hospital named after
part of the movie.
for being involved in medicine. So, bam, she must be legit. It's like that means that means fuck all. But the fact that the narrative fits, and of course it's always a much more palatable narrative when this great person is descendant from great blood or something like that.
That's interesting too. It's kind of like the noble blood idea.
Well, it's like if you're even in entertainment, if you are the son or daughter of someone who is in entertainment, it's a better narrative for you to also be talented.
Yeah, look at Jeff Bridges, look at Michael Douglas. No,
exactly.
Yeah, it's the nepotism. But no, there was another part of the documentary that I thought was very clever. What I think it was right after that Fortune guy is kind of like breaking down and can't find his words. He's like, I just realized everything was a lie. And then it goes to all of those screens where she's like saying like, I'm afraid of needles, and I'm, you know, my grandfather was a doctor or whatever.
Well, she talks about my uncle I loved so much.
Yes,
my question was, is there an uncle?
Yeah, me too.
Exactly.
I was wondering the same thing.
It was kind of implied that it all went to black and white. It pulled up the screens. Everything was a lie, and then it made me think, yeah, maybe she never had this uncle that died.
Yeah, exactly.
All of it was bullshit.
I used to work for a large media company, and I was a producer in their production team, and we were responsible for making online content and viral videos and shit like that, right? That was what our job was. One of the companies that we ran was a tailoring company. And it was called, like, I don't remember even what the name was. It was something so fucking racist, but it was like Johnny Wong's Hong Kong Tailors. I'm not exaggerating. It was something like that, right? And I remember I was at a conference one time and we were talking about this company, and hundreds of people are coming up to us talking about this company, and they're like, does Johnny Wong even exist? And behind me there was a picture of a Chinese man with a text that was like, Johnny Wong was my grandfather, and he was a tailor that worked in Hong Kong for all these years and did blah, blah, blah. And it was this story. And they looked at me and they said, is Johnny Wong even real? And then I'm not going to say the owner of the company's name, but I said, do you know the owner of the company? Insert name here. And they said, yeah. And I said, tell me what you think. And they looked at me and they were like, okay, because this is a trade secret, man. You tell stories, you create a myth in order to sell it. And it isn't something that somehow she's this outlier. Like, this is really common. Like, you exaggerate a little bit. You tell a little bit of your myth. You create your story. You create your narrative. And then that's what you're selling. It doesn't matter as long as you can reproduce. And that's the problem, is that she couldn't reproduce the results, or she couldn't produce profits. That's the issue. It's not that her speculation on the technology was bad or anything like that. It's just that she couldn't fucking deliver.
We have
and she lied about it.
A comment coming in from K Monkey. He says, you guys mentioned nobility and entertainment, and you don't mention your boy Nick Cage.
Yeah, okay.
So yes, touche.
You mean Nicholas Coppola?
Nicholas Coppola.
Yeah, Nicholas Coppola, but...
Thank God for that.
Yeah. I mean, look, there might be hundreds of thousands of people in LA right now that are just as talented as Nick Cage, but they'll never get the chance because they're not a Coppola. I mean, it's certainly possible. Yep. But there are a lot of people, I mean, like Michael Douglas, still a great actor.
Oh, he's awesome.
Nicolas Cage, still a great actor. So, I mean, I'm not saying that it precludes you from being talented. Okay, so one other question. What is the actual timeline? So she quit Stanford at 19, started Theranos, and then what did she do for the next X amount of years before she got her first investment?
She raised her first amount of money like right away. In the first year, she raised, I see, $6.9 million to get it started. They're developing stuff, and then they raised their next big round. So they raised that in 2004. 6 years later, they're probably developing stuff, and they raise $45 million. I don't know what they're doing. Well, in the book, I remember they're mentioning that effectively they're just starting to figure out what this Edison machine is going to do, how it's going to work. They're spending a lot of time engineering the little mechanics, the robotics of that thing to be able to like pick a sample, put it into the right hole. Those reacting agents are sort of like playing with the machinery there, but none of it worked, and all of it was held very secret. And they would do these demonstrations, these sort of performative demonstrations, which they mentioned in the documentary, where they would bring someone along, like an investor or the journalist along, put them into a room, have them do the prick sample, put it into the machine, and they'd be like, well, the results are going to take a while, so why don't we just go for a little walk? And they'd take them for a walk, and then they'd have these guys come in and run down and then run a real test on it.
Yeah, they said that in the documentary.
Yeah, and sometimes it wouldn't even be a real test at all.
Yeah.
They just wouldn't send a result at all to anybody. But I don't know the detail of what they were building exactly. I mean, it could be everything from hiring a lot of people to do God knows what, to a security detail, to the little prick bottles and the little capsules. They had to develop all of those little pieces. So it was like a bullshit factory for a long time, I'm sure. And then I think that once they announced the deal with Walgreens, that was also.
And when was that? Like,
let me see here.
Yeah, I'm looking here too.
How do you spell Walgreens?
29 to 30.
So the partnership was in 2013. So this is about 6 years later.
Yep.
okay.
About 9 years later, actually. I'm sorry. 9 years after they raised that first round of funding, and they raised a second round in 2010. Then in 2013, they announced this partnership. And in the book, it mentions that this partnership starts off. That gives them a ton of traction to go raise a lot more money because now it's really legit.
Yeah.
And they start to have conversations with military for a military contract. But all of that doesn't materialize. They've sold a deal, and they can't deliver on it. On the military side, they can't get FDA approval or the internal approval that they need. And on the Walgreens side, they can't produce results, and they can't figure out what to do. And that delay takes like 3 or 4 more years before they open that first store in Arizona. And by that point, I think that's really when the shit hits the fan, is that they're starting to put this out to the market and do stuff, which is now at this point, 10 years later or 13 years later, and it's all fake. And that's the part where it all starts to break down, because the results are not actually real.
I want to get...
the interesting thing is, though, is that they could have, like, if they had just a long-term strategy where they weren't so pressured to push it to market to turn a profit, it's still a very interesting idea.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not it's physically impossible ever, or whether it's just impossible maybe in the next 5, 10, 15 years because we don't have the technology to be able to extract the appropriate information to analyze it, I don't know. But if you this is what science does all the time. Like, I was just reading this about this thing called a holometer, where there's this physicist who's trying to basically disprove all the findings of quantum theory and the kind of dominant understandings of string theory at the moment. But he doesn't know if it's going to work. But nevertheless, he's got this like long-term investment to be able to try to understand whether or not there is a small unit of space called quantum space. Now, he may not eventually solve it. He may not prove it. But nevertheless, he's got investment. The problem is that you can't do that when you have like $900 million of investment from private investors who want to see a return on their profit. Yep. So there's also a problem with the short-term demands to go to market here, rather than just allowing somebody to kind of explore indefinitely.
I don't know. I mean, I hear you. There's always the pressure of like short-term returns and the near, or short-term returns in the near term, but in this case, it's pure fraud, right? In this case, like,
well, because she said it works.
Yeah, she says it works. She says they claim to have billions of dollars in revenue when in fact they'd only actually booked cash flow of a couple $100,000. We're talking about mass fraud, similar to the Fire Festival side, where he had said, I own millions of dollars of Facebook stock, and it was like $4,500, things like that. So there were clear lies, I mean, throughout the whole piece, which is different. I think investors come on board. Well, look,
but you don't think that she thought that she really could do this? Like if someone came to her and they were like, "Here's a 50-year investment where I will fund you to find the solution," you don't think that she actually cared about that? Do you think that she literally from the outset was like, "I'm going to defraud people"?
I think the documentary says this. Like early on, she probably thought that she could do it and could build this company, but as the lies mounted, you start to have to believe those lies enough to keep, because let's say you've raised $6 million and this is my vision for a company, and you hit physical limitations, reality limitations at some point, and instead of saying, oh, it really was hard, the timing is just too soon, we can't get this done, and you close it down, instead you start to lie. And then all of a sudden you've gone from $6.9 million to $45 million in funding to $100 million in funding to $400 million in funding, and along the way you're just lying more and more and more to keep afloat for too long. It falls apart. Like you're just lying.
Yeah, you're rationalizing it to where it would make sense to a normal person, but she's not. Like, she still has an elevated level of psychosis going on.
And she thinks that it's real. She says at the end, she's like, "Oh, it does work. I completely believe this." And
what does that mean? It does work. Like, it either works or it doesn't.
No, exactly.
If it did, she wouldn't be in.
But I think
whatever.
the defense that you're saying is probably her defense. The defense that you're saying, Austin, which is, I thought it was going to work, and I thought it worked, and in my mind it's working, and we were on the right path.
So
that's going to be her defense.
She's basically pleading insanity.
Yeah, in a sense, right? It sounds like she's going to say, in my mind, reality was X, but the true reality was Y, and they weren't the same thing. And it's not my fault that they're not. They don't.
Is
they
that
don't.
a defense for fraud?
I don't know.
I don't think
not
you
for
can
fraud,
legally
but for her
use
belief
that.
of it all. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean.
No,
not
there's
the same
there are
thing.
there's like literal fraud, like the things like cooking the books and things that she did that I think she's gonna be guilty for, but the fraud or for the
What if
other
her
piece,
lawyer does want to plead insanity?
That'd
he
be
might.
interesting.
They probably will.
Maybe.
What were the it was on certain counts that she had pled not guilty, which was it conspiracy or I can't remember exactly.
The documentary didn't
She-
specify.
At the very end, I think it
says
was
two things.
two things.
It was fraud and conspiracy.
Yeah, right.
So
Her and
it's
other guy.
shocking that she's pleading not guilty, but I guess
Well, it's like Austin. I
And
mean,
Sonny.
she doesn't feel like she defrauded people. Like she believes in her idea. All of the other stuff was just buying more time. The lying is. The ends justify the means in a way for her, right? Like this is a noble thing. She does not feel like she.
That's
committed
why I thought
fraud.
that experiment, the Dan Ariely experiment, when it's like
So
the
interesting.
lie detector stops working as soon as you think that it's noble.
Yeah.
Not that again. I think. Do you really think that she was in this because she was noble, or she just convinced herself that this was a noble cause? Because to me, that seems like ultimately, doesn't she just want to be a billionaire and just want to be a rich, famous CEO?
I don't know.
Do you
Or
think she
just-
really cared about people? Like, then if she did, why did she not care that her employee committed suicide, and why didn't she care that other
that
people
was-
got killed and other people got bullied and completely, followed and. Those lawyers
Well,
are pretty disgusting.
human motivations are extremely complex,
Yes.
right? Like, there's a tendency when we abstract away from the complexity of the human to turn them into a singular entity. Like, she is a monster. And that's what Gibney does in this film in some ways. I read an interview with him where he said that he spent a lot of time on the beat, that he calls it, of fraudsters. So he's got his documentary on Scientology, he's got the one on Enron, and then he's got the one on Lance Armstrong, right? And he's clearly trying to make this like the fourth in that lineage, that she too is a fraudster. And I think that when you reduce somebody down to the simple, abstract, accessible, digestible soundbite of Elizabeth Holmes fraud, I think that kind of reduces the complexity of things. And I think you're absolutely right, Jacob, that towards the end, at least, she is a bullshitter. At that point, she's selling snake oil. The machine doesn't work. She's lying in order to buy herself more time. And maybe she still is using that Edison idea, where he delayed 4 years so that he could figure out how to solve the filament problem. Maybe that there's an element that, or maybe she just is a fucking liar and she's a habitual liar and lies became her. Once you start with one, then it becomes easy for two, and then you're already kind of just engaged in just half-truths, partial truths, and you have to just kind of continue that. But it's not that like she's sitting there with a master plan where her and Sonny are in the background are like, how are we going to manipulate people today? Totally. It's more like, I've got to just say what I've got to get so I can tell the person what they want to hear so they will get off my back. And then I got to figure shit out. But I do think that doesn't negate that she really did think that this product could be revolutionary and transformative in preventative medicine.
I did say, I will say, like, I feel a lot more, I feel disgusted by her in the documentary, whereas in the book, I felt much more, like, compassionate. I felt sorry for her in the book, which is like, wow, she was in deep, and she fucked it up, and she must be, like, she's
to
just,
say the least.
yeah, pretty screwed.
Yeah.
All right, I got a question.
Helen, I got a question.
Yes.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So, and I don't want to just go straight down the I don't want this to be patronizing gender politics here. But
okay.
seriously, as a woman, when she was announced as like the youngest female self-made billionaire, what effect did that have on like the science community and the science literature? Because I don't read like science journals and science blogs and stuff like that nearly as much as you did. Was she just like, was this the future, especially in the contemporary moment where we are so attuned to female voices? This had to have been just transformative.
I actually don't know. I don't know how the community at large kind of, viewed her. It seemed like there was a lot of skepticism based on what I'm reading from physicians. And I've talked to at least one who has said, yeah, if you're a doctor, you knew this wasn't going to fucking work because it's just
Really?
too complicated. It's too complicated for the size of the box. Which engineer was it who was saying, they're trying to manipulate physics in ways that are just not possible. And that was kind of what I was heard too from
So
talking
is it
to
just
this
the
one guy.
size of the box or also the amount of blood?
I
Like,
mean,
could
most of the
you
blood,
use a regular commercially available blood
I
tester?
think it was I don't know. I don't think so.
It was
At this
the
point,
amounts-
because the technology.
in the book, it was the amounts of blood that were just too
Yeah.
small. Like, you just need a lot more. you need a larger sample to get more accurate results.
Yeah.
Especially when you start to mix them with agents and all that kind of thing.
So I'm sure it was on multiple levels. You know, there was like clearly some problems with this that people who, you know, were really in the, you know, kind of on the ground in the field saw that, you know, the general news media that kind of, you know, we love to celebrate young entrepreneurs. We glorify them, right? And that she had a compelling story, especially as a woman, I think. You know, so I mean, I was inspired by her, youngest female, but you know, it's aspirational, right?
But
like
it was the kind of thing like if you raised your hand to say, "Hey, we have a physical problem here," it's like, "Yep, you're fired, and we're gonna have a lawyer follow you until you kill yourself."
You know, you're not cut out to be in Silicon Valley. You know, that crazy shit. Yeah, like oh my god.
Well, I thought that was really good. Was it Tyler or the?
It was one of the
kid,
engineers.
the guy with the grandson. When he's like, I would have a problem, and I'd be downstairs in the basement, and things weren't working, and it was like a disaster.
Right.
Yeah.
Then I go upstairs, and I would be like, wow, I'm inspired again. I go back downstairs, like, wait, what just happened?
That was so brilliant. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it was the carpet.
The carpet versus
inside
the
of
tile.
building
Was
Yes.
where
everything was great, but then in the tile, I loved that spatialization of everything. That was really nice. I liked that a lot.
He was really it was really cool to hear him talk about it.
Well, I read a lot of things. So like in the book and then in the podcast and then any of the like ABC series and stuff like that, it doesn't really talk about any sort of reconciliation between him and his grandson. I'm sorry, between him and his grandfather, who was the former Secretary of State, right? But a lot of people on Twitter, I guess, were very happy that this film showed that they do reconcile. So for people out there, there's a reconciliation between grandson and grandpa, which is kind of nice.
That is nice to hear.
Yeah, because in the book it goes on for a while. And he's like, "No, you're not listening to me. She's a good person. You're an idiot."
Yeah.
Aww.
So related to that, and related to the question that Austin just asked Helen, I got to ask, was so much of this just like a bunch of old-ass dudes just being horn dogs?
Good, interesting
that
question.
That was going to be my next question.
And Bill Clinton's like, "She's fantastic."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do
God,
like this lady.
Or like an
Maybe.
element of that.
Could have been.
And then
They're
flip
so
side,
bewitched, right?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't pick. First, I didn't personally pick them because she just seemed so. She didn't seem like a, you know, kind of this sex kitten kind of thing. She wasn't like, look at this. But
when you're
maybe-
96 years old.
Maybe. I don't know. I'm not a 96-year-old man. I cannot speak to the sex or aspirations of these
Be
people.
empathetic.
But, like, I don't know.
I'm just saying, if somebody comes to you and it seems like, and they're pitching you as the next Thomas Edison, and they're attractive, and you're a 96-year-old dude.
And they're female.
It definitely, the story would have been very different had she been unattractive, or I think had she not been white and also been, you know, not, like she came from pedigree. She spent her education trust on
It matters
this stuff.
that she looks good on the cover of a magazine.
It makes, oh yeah, this would have been totally fucking different, I think, if it was, in my opinion. But I mean, you know, I don't know if the motivations there were, definitely not the motivations weren't sexual, but did it make it easier to be like, yeah, I'm gonna back this lady?
I'm
like,
not suggesting
bro.
there was actually any hanky-panky. I'm just saying
Well, there was.
that, like,
I
you know,
don't think so.
Yeah, I
All
mean,
right.
I loved Henry Kissinger saying, like, those board meetings were a human rights violation. They were too long.
Okay,
God.
I do think, Jared, though, I think that's a really important component to this that isn't getting as much attention. That there are a couple ways to look at this, I think. One is she being portrayed as like this temptress, which women have been portrayed as a temptress for centuries, millennia, right? I mean, the fucking Lilith is the first woman created by God who was then turned into a demon because she wouldn't be submissive to Adam. And then in some sort of reading of interpretations from Jewish scholarship, it's because she wanted to be on top, right? So if you're a dominant woman, you are sometimes viewed as somehow being or violating the natural order or something along those lines. Like that has been a part of human mythology and storytelling for millennia. So there's a sense in which I think you can see that in this, that she's kind of being portrayed as this temptress, this powerful, it's not that she's asexual. It's almost like her sexual libidinal energy is off the table because she dresses in the black turtlenecks and all black. And so it's kind of like not form, quote unquote, flattering, I guess we would say.
But she's got the sexiest voice in Silicon Valley.
Well, yeah, but she's got the doe eyes and she doesn't blink and she's got blonde hair, which she wasn't a natural blonde. Like, there are photos of her where her hair gets darker.
I think
and so it's almost like there is this repressed sexuality or libidinal desire that is something that's an important component to consider in this.
Everyone's very excited by your
reading.
vocabulary, Austin, in the chat room. Foul temptress and wow, what words? Libidinal. Everyone's very impressed.
That is amazing. But,
All right, real quick, I got to get a little meta for a second because one of my favorite parts of the documentary. So we already talked about how she's selling this narrative. She's aspiring to her favorite narrative of Thomas Edison. One part I really like is when she talks about, and Alex Gibney does this really beautiful illustration where she talks about how she got into Moby Dick. And then I was like, okay, now this is like art reflecting the narrative that is a built narrative. Because Moby Dick, Ahab, like her, was a monomaniac. He had a single goal that was seemingly impossible, and he failed. And I don't know. I just thought that was pretty. That made me geek out pretty hard. But anyway, I want to move on to the next point, and that is when I was watching this, I was with my friend, and I'm about to press play, and he says, "Okay, before you do that, why are we watching this? Why?" You watching this is only going to draw more attention to these horrible people. And he made me, before I press play, ask, like, why are we watching this? You're only going to contribute more to this industry that worships these people who are doing clearly very bad, unethical things. And he kind of made me admit that I think that her, as well as Billy McFarland, on some level, are rock stars. What do you guys think about that?
totally. They're
Yeah,
totally...
and I mean, this was someone brought up in the comments earlier. HBO also did the Bernie Madoff piece too. Like you've got all of these fraudsters, and at that level and scale, when you really don't give a shit if these investors, if you don't give a shit that Rupert Murdoch lost $125 million, like, although there is a heroic story of his, I'll tell him a second from the book, but you don't give a shit if he loses $125 million, or the Waltons lose $100 million,
The only
or Betsy DeVos loses $120 million.
The only people you feel bad for are the people who got fucked over at Walgreens.
Yeah, exactly.
And
the people and the
patients,
employees and people who believe in the vision, whatever. But like,
I meant the patients.
Yeah,
yeah,
just
the
be clear.
patients.
And the Klabon. But yeah, go ahead.
But I think so. You don't care about that part so much. So the story is heroic in the fact that wow, you were able to swindle the best of the best. It's kind of like Wolf of Wall Street in some ways. I mean, although that's more like the penny stock side. But you're celebrating their ability to get it done. And I think I mean they are rock stars in that regard. And because we don't care about who they affected in some ways, except not the employees that killed themselves. Again, for the people who got swindled here, we're talking about major investors who are going to be fine. I think that's why we kind of are okay with their rock star status. But that's my perspective.
Can I do a little economics for a second here?
Do it.
And I'll try to make it interesting.
I'll let you know what the comments say.
There are a few economic figures that I think we should consider right now. One is a guy named Joseph Schumpeter, who is really known for this notion of creative destruction. But one of the things he talks about is what drives business cycles is the entrepreneur's vision for innovation and for creativity. Right? So he develops this notion of business cycles derived from this Russian economist named Kondratiev, who has these things called K-waves, which are these long business cycles of ups and downs. And what is it that ultimately drives those things? All kinds of different people have different theories. There's like the Marxist theory of history that's about class struggle. But for Schumpeter, it's entrepreneurs. So then Keynes is another figure I'd want to bring into this. I'm going to synthesize a couple things here. Keynes says that money is the link between the present and the future, right? Keynes is probably the most famous economist from the 20th century for people that are listening that aren't as familiar. But there's this idea then also that needs to be attached to this, that credit as a form of money is using the future in the present. So I think if we bring together Schumpeter and Keynes and then this notion of credit with regard to speculation, what that gives us insight into why it is that we love entrepreneurs so much today. Because entrepreneurs are the ones who have power over the credit to make the future possible. They bring the future into the present. And if people are interested in where this idea comes from, there's a woman named Elena Esposito, who's a sociologist in finance, who writes a lot about the future and how it is that what speculation does is it tries to bring the future into the present, and how that's different in U.S. finance than in European finance and in traditional theories of finance. And that right now the U.S. model of finance dominates because instead of trying to use the present to prepare for the future, what dominates us is that we're actually trying to use the future as our speculative image that transforms our present. And that's what this woman was able to do. That's what Billy McFarland was supposedly able to do. It's create an image of the future, create your future, and you as this person that is looking at Instagram models that wants that thing that you don't quite have attained yet. And you use that to transform or to regulate what it is that you do in the present. And I think that's why we fetishize these people so much, is because they are the gatekeepers. They are the pinnacle. They are the ones who have control over the future. And I think that's something that really helps us explain why we love these people.
Sure,
so much.
but when there's no substance there, that's the danger, right? Like Steve Jobs brings us into that level of the future that AT&T dreamed of 20, 30, 40 years ago, and all of a sudden, wow, we're in this place where we have mobile phones and we can do our work wherever we are, at the beach, etc. And he delivered on that promise. Or Elon Musk, there's a future where cars cannot have any emissions, and wow, he delivers on that promise. And so, yeah, money becomes that link through investment, but that link of like the future, dreaming that up and making it happen and making it a reality. And what we're observing instead, similar to like true crime, where we're observing just people doing bad things, and it's exciting and very interesting to investigate. We're seeing that happening in the business front, where just like you can defraud someone or you can swindle someone on one end, you can do that in the business realm with this very buttoned up, very white collar appearance, and you can do it with the best of the best and the most sophisticated people. And that's where I think it becomes fascinating to say, oh, even at that level, there's this incredible level of sophisticated deceit, and that's an interesting thing to observe.
Yeah, now, Jacob, you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So, like, I feel like this, in many ways, probably offends you, because in a way you're kind of impressed that somebody was able to kind of control the market in that way. But is there I'm assuming that it offends you because I know that you're a moral human who has like good intentions.
What are you talking about?
That's why Wisecrack exists, because you and Jared wanted to change people for the good.
Yeah, we wanted to change the world for the better. Because when you want to change the world, you create Wisecrack.
Like, are you offended by this idea of like speculation on the future and controlling the future, but without substance? Does that like disappoint you, or like what do you think about that?
I think it would have offended a younger version of myself. So we do have to remember that Elizabeth Holmes was 19, and you are so... Think about, like, Austin, you're also a film lover. Jared, you're a filmmaker. When you're young, you can observe another filmmaker and you become very emulative, and you say, okay, they seem to be... I love Paul Thomas Anderson. They seem to be using the camera in this way. It's constantly moving. It's constantly changing. And I'm gonna emulate that performance, and I'm gonna direct a film in that way, or I'm gonna make a movie like that. That's the definition of what a good movie is. And you see her falling into the same trap with Steve Jobs. So by that, I just mean as a younger person, even myself as a younger entrepreneur, I would say, I'd buy into the bullshit. I'd say, no, you have to have this vision and this confidence, because entrepreneurs are the ones who really do change the world, and they do move the world forward. And they're ones who do take the risk. And part of me definitely still believes that. I definitely do think that entrepreneurship and enterprise allows these sorts of things to happen.
Totally.
But I will say that Wisecrack has changed me. I don't know for the better, but Jared has gotten under my skin in a way, good or bad. But it's allowed me to also be a little more level-headed, I think, about things like this, where I'm not offended, because it's not... I think I've allowed my own definition of my identity and definitions of what I believe be more fluid. I'm more open to seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly, and that includes entrepreneurship or anything else. Like, you can see the same kind of thing even for people who work only in nonprofits and only help people and are social workers. There can be a dirty and dark side to that too. And I think, Wisecrack is
invisible children.
You're looking at I'm just selling here. You're looking at a transformed man because of Wisecrack. I am a transformed Pearson.
It's not the red pill,
Are you trying to
not
sell
the
your
black
book?
pill, not the blue pill.
It's the yellow pill.
It's the my life is ruined pill.
Yeah, you're seeing a changed, sad man. No, I was actually reflecting on that a little bit, thinking like, is this challenging my very identity and my grit? And it didn't so much. And I think, again, I'm seeing myself change over time, where I'm a little more cynical and a little more skeptical of entrepreneurship, where so much can be used as a marketing ploy. And the more we kind of unfold that, I think it just doesn't become as personally offensive to me anymore. And I think, entrepreneurship it's got to be investigated and looked at in the same way. Like, is this bullshit we're talking about? You need optimism. You need that. I think even the Dan Ariely mentions this. Like, you need that optimism. You need someone to be kind of crazy to take that leap of faith and believe. But at the same time, when you get into fraud territory, that comes down to the actions and what is this entrepreneur really doing.
So in my desperate attempt to think of some justification for why I'm about to watch this and to get the movie starting because it's 2 hours and I got to go to bed, I kind of said, and I'm curious what you guys think about this, that stories like hers and Billy McFarland's function as some kind of cultural whistleblowers. Because stories that are so absolutely nuts that they point out glaring issues with our society, like the cult of Silicon Valley, our ability to get blinded by a good narrative, the media's ability to be easily manipulated, the vacuousness of business speak, and everyone loves to see a train crash into the mountain.
Oh, yeah.
So, I don't know. I do think that there is kind of a productive element to people like this. I mean, without the Fyre Fest and without this, there would be perhaps less skepticism towards Silicon Valley. And I think, and that's what I want to talk about next, is just Silicon Valley and how this, as well as other things that are happening, are creating, I think, a pretty distinctly critical disposition on them.
No, but I think that's a very smart point. Like, in a way, this is Jared and I we talk about like media savvy, like having a media literacy, being able to like to read the news and understand if this is real or fake, or what's the perspective or what's the source. In a way, these documentaries are highlighting like the bullshit and how to be literate about business in a way, or literate about like this whole world of like we're killing it and we're crushing it and we're changing the world, we're doing this, where all of that is you know.
And I think it's also entertaining for her especially. Although this certainly wasn't her intention, but you could definitely consume it as some kind of really bizarre performance arc. 'Cause that's what she was doing. She was pretending to be a genius, and she was just surfing that narrative.
Wow.
You know, just
everyone in this shirt,
I just tweeted about this, and I'm being hyperbolic, but I said, you know, everyone is like, oh, Elizabeth Holmes' voice is so stupid. And then everyone is also like, oh, she's wearing those turtlenecks. What a phony. That's just ripping off Steve Jobs. And then I'm like, but also everyone is like, ooh, quick, take a picture of me driving this Maserati so I can put it on Instagram and pretend that it's mine. Like, I think it's so easy for us to talk shit about Elizabeth Holmes and her performative elements. But at the same time, all she is really, in a way, is kind of a symptom of a larger structural tendency.
And a reflection of the stories that we want to be real.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, we create these people, I think, by worshiping them. And worshiping them without justification, without asking, how the fuck does the thing work? Let me see the inside of it before I give you $500 million fucking dollars. Like, that we don't ask, you know, or I don't know. Yeah, exactly. 900, like whatever. Like, it's just insane. It's like, but it's not. It also, I think, makes sense. It's aspirational, right? And the media, again, it's I keep saying this, but it's this celebrity CEO culture. People, you know, you talk to kids, they want to be Elon Musk. They want to be Steve Jobs. Nobody's going to want to be Elizabeth Holmes now, and that's a good thing. But you need to understand that, like, you know...
You don't want to get caught.
These
things take hard work.
This whole joke is on Silicon Valley. One of my favorite parts of the documentary is the fact that as soon as it, bam, hits to the credits, it's back to MC Hammer. Don, 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 don. And the scene where they have MC Hammer, where she's... very awkwardly kind
dancing?
Of strutting up.
Oh, Jesus, it's
the lamest fucking thing I've ever seen.
Oh my God.
She's strutting up to the top about her fake FDA approval while MC Hammer is playing. So lame. And that's why I think that using MC Hammer in the credits was a great kind of rim shot. It was a great, you know, that, Silicon Valley, not only, I said rim shot.
A rim job?
At least I hope that's what I said. But yeah, what was once like, wow, all these people in this room are making so much money. Look how positive they are. Now it's just like, look at these fucking suckers.
Yeah.
Clowns
Jumping in the castle.
Can I provide a foil to this? Because here's the thing. I think that's what the documentary wants us to feel at the surface level. But really, this doesn't do anything to stop or impede Silicon Valley's cash flow. It doesn't stop or impede the expansion of platforms. It doesn't in any way really indict the system of financial speculation that currently is dominating our economic system. I think that this is just a way for us to feel good about ourselves and our moral, puritanical campaign against things that make us feel bad, but that doesn't really have any material effects.
I mean,
now,
it does
kind of
something,
cynical, but
I mean, if you're a billionaire investor and you see this documentary and then someone comes to you and says, hey, I've got this technology, you might be inspired to at least look at the details.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but you know what? But how many? So this is like a centralized case of one company that was trying to do this. How many hundreds of different companies now are going to be capitalizing on diagnostic, sort of proactive biomedical technology over the next 10 years and are going to make 20 times the amount of money that this company was valued for, that are going to generate tens of billions. So I don't think it actually does much other than kind of make us feel good about ourselves that we policed one girl who spoke in a low voice.
The problem isn't people creating technology that enables people to be more preventative about their healthcare. I mean, that's a positive vision. The problem is Silicon Valley having this cult-like persona or cult-like ideas where you put the goalposts so far away and then say, I have no idea how we're going to get there, but we're literally just going to make up numbers in our business plan, sell investors on it, and just try. And if anyone questions it along the way, then they're just not a Silicon Valley kind of person, or they don't believe in the vision.
It's the anyone questioning it along the way. It's that culture allows people like Elizabeth Holmes to thrive for as long as they did, and allows them to live in mansions alone that their parents end up decorating or something. That's a different story. But yeah, I agree with Jared. I don't think that the problem is innovation or money going into innovation. It's that these figures themselves that Silicon Valley creates. I mean, I don't know.
I guess I'm just curious or skeptical about whether or not this is actually going to change that tendency. I think that
it's not a revolution. It's just a documentary, just one little blip in a general cultural shift that may or may not be happening.
But between this and Fire Festival, I think you're getting more skepticism of this whole moment of this blind faith. I think that's being challenged in these documentaries. It's coming more front and center now, and that's happening for Bernie Madoff and those kinds of pyramid schemes, but also now for entrepreneurship. I think Claire mentioned on the Fire Festival doc, it was great, kind of this mention of there's this worship of celebrities, of entrepreneurs, and what is this new class of kind of evil entrepreneurs? What would you call them? They're sort of the protagonist entrepreneurs, but it is giving you a new perspective. And I think it's going to happen if that hits and affects the investment community. That's going to hit and affect who's getting supported, who's getting funded, and what companies are being made. But I think to Jared's point, if the technology ultimately lands, even if it makes more money than Theranos, that's a good thing. If it's actually working.
Yeah.
All right.
I hope you're right.
Everyone's also saying, by the way, preach Jared. Jared 2020. Jared should do a TED Talk.
I'm definitely not running for president. There's too much dirt.
I think the T-shirt is helping. It's getting you in the mood for in the look for a TED Talk.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead into the mailbag. If you want to give us a call at our voicemail service, it's 213-534-8807 or 21-ELF-GUT or ELF-HUT-07. All right, so we got Maddie with a question about the Fire Festival. Go, Maddie.
Hi, Wisecrack. This is Maddie from West Virginia calling about your Netflix Fire Festival episode on Show Me the Meaning. Something really interesting that occurs on Instagram with people my age, I'm about 20, and especially with people younger than me that are still in high school, is that they have what are called their quote-unquote real Instagram and then their quote-unquote fake Instagram. So on the real Instagram, they post normal pictures that you'd expect to find on Instagram, living my best life, that kind of stuff. And then on their fake Instagram, or they're called Finstas, they post pictures of really ugly selfies or quote unquote behind the scenes pictures of them from their normal Instagram. And for captions for these, they have things like, I'm so depressed, I hate so and so. And I thought it was really interesting because it plays into the whole thing you guys were talking about in the Fire Festival documentary, where everything on Instagram is so fake. But I think it's interesting that they call these Finstas, which are fake Instagrams, they're fake, but they contain more of their real thoughts. So I was just wondering what you guys thought about that. Love the podcast, and thanks.
Thank you for calling. Yeah, that's
Thank
cool.
you for calling, Maddie. That is pretty interesting. The fake Instagram is the more real you. I had never heard of this.
Really?
I hadn't either. Yeah. So
you guys haven't heard of Finsta? It's interesting.
Wait. So the fake Instagram account is where you post the ugly pictures and things like things that are not meant to be flexing.
It's, I guess, more something. I don't know. Why don't you
more
explain?
private,
I'm looking at
apparently.
Tim out there.
It's
Maybe
like
he can explain.
more intimate, more private, I guess, where you kind of, you've got your public persona and you've got your private persona that only the people who are close to you can see.
And the Finsta is the fake Insta is the one that's more private.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
fake, right? Exactly. It's the alias, if you will. So
The more intimate version.
yeah, I mean,
So that'd be like my Instagram, which is just pictures of dogs, is the Finsta, and I don't even
That's your
have
Finsta.
a real Insta.
Yeah.
sure, yeah.
The
very
funny
I think
thing is
Wisecrack
there's
is
an
your real
admission-
Insta.
like
The funny thing is that there's kind of an admission then, in a weird way, in a roundabout way, that the quote-unquote real Insta is actually just like a facade, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I loved what
And-
Claire said in the last one about. Oh, sorry, I interrupted you. But there's a lot of
No,
pressure
yeah.
there to have that real public persona. That's why I hate Instagram. Like, I don't want to post. I don't want to put myself out there. It's like there's so much pressure to do that right, and the kind of having that private, that private little kind of space where you can be yourself is very comforting in a world where you have all of that kind of pressure, I think. But go ahead. What were you saying? I mean,
No,
I
I
don't
was just going to. Jared's boy, Zizek, has previously
Oh, my boy.
dealt
Your boy.
to what ideology is. Ideology used to be understood as, you don't know what you're doing, but you're doing it anyway. That's kind of what demonstrates what ideology is, that we're kind of just unaware. It's the unknown unknowns, I guess, or unknown knowns. But now he says that actually ideology is we know exactly what we're doing, and we know it's bullshit, but we do it anyway. It's cognitive dissonance, right? And that's kind of it. Like, that Instagram is bullshit. You know that the image that you're portraying is a facade, but you do it anyway. And it's kind of strange. It's kayfabe, but it's a consciousness that's attached to it. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it's tied so much in being, I mean, like, it's what a perfect documentary here and Fire, of course, to think about. I mean, we've talked about this in our video, but to think about how you're performing, and these are our heroes, and again, there's no substance behind the veil. There's not a lot of substance back there, and so when we look at someone like Elizabeth Holmes and Billy McFarland and these people, I mean,
there's only
Yeah.
the Instagram
I was about to
That's
say,
right.
do these
They're-
people have Finstas? What are they like?
it doesn't sound like she's got one. Tell me
No.
something. Tell me a secret about yourself. There's nothing there. Wow.
We actually have an email, a pretty similar question. This is from. Actually, I'm going to screw up the name. Isaias. He says, recently a popular trend called #TrashTag has gotten social media users out in their communities cleaning litter, then posting about it online, and I was curious to see if the Wisecrack folks thought this was also problematic. People are doing great things, but is the act of posting the pic more important than helping the environment, or does it not matter?
This is like the whole filming and videotaping the concert, like you mentioned, so looking through your phone as opposed to watching the actual experience. I don't find it problematic, though. I mean, it depends on what it's for. I mean,
I don't know if you're
mean,
going
yeah,
if you're
it's
going
gonna be an
to
ice bucket
whatever
challenge.
a volunteer and you're only doing it to have that social media post, then you're probably not going to do it again.
if it's only for that, sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, celebrities have done this forever, right? Like, it's always was good PR, go help the kids in the third world country. I mean, this is kind of the natural extension of that culture becoming so accessible to us, right? Like, through
Yeah.
social media.
I'm not going to say that it's bad that they're going to pick up trash,
Yeah.
even if they were compelled to do it by Instagram. But I would say I would prefer they do it and not post it because
Or post it, but keep doing it. I mean, I don't know.
I don't
Whatever.
care if you.
Like,
For me, I don't care if you post it. Doesn't matter. But
yeah.
as I mean,
Well,
yeah, I think that matters. I mean,
actually, I don't know. I think about this a lot. Like, one of my favorite subjects in neuroscience is the idea of mirror neurons, right? Is the idea of mirroring somebody and kind of taking their behavior and, kind of performing it yourself, right? And I don't know, maybe seeing if it inspires more people to do that because of that kind of idea, that kind of, I mean, it's not exact, right? You can't completely apply that to this, but just the act of seeing someone else do that and, behave that way and give a shit. Maybe that overall kind of justifies the act in some sense. Does it have those kinds of reverberations? I don't
that's
know.
the idea.
I mean,
It's like the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. I think it's trying to motivate more action.
Yeah, but what
It's a
happens? What
campaign.
happens when people just go out to the side of the road, pick up one can, take a picture, throw the can back down on the road, and then drive home?
That
I don't know
is
if
so
it-
cynical.
Do they
but,
do that? Do they throw it back on the ground?
Well, what do you mean? Do they do that? I mean, if their goal is just to get an image, then why wouldn't they do that?
Yeah, but maybe they're taking it to the trash can now. Maybe.
God,
Fine,
If
one
if
can.
one can.
One
Sure.
can.
Yeah.
Fuck.
One more can. I mean,
Damn it.
I think a lot of this. I mean,
Real-
this goes back to the age-old question of like the ethical questions, right? Like if you get some sort of return on the activity that you've done, like you tell somebody, "Oh, I gave $1 million to somebody," does that contaminate the good of the act? Because did you somehow only do it so that you would be noticed for being noble or being generous or something like that, right? And then there's different theories, like in deontological ethics, it's just more about, no, you do it because it's your duty to do it, right? You're not trying to get some sort of return on your reward. I think that a lot of this has to do with kind of coming out of the tendency that you're talking about with like picking up trash and then kind of tweeting it. It comes out of the Protestant work ethic, that is this idea that by doing the good act or by working hard, you can somehow demonstrate that you are the good person, and that there is an effort to like seek some sort of reward on that. The question is, and I can't answer this now, but at least I want to frame it, is does that contaminate the good? Or is it like Helen just said, what happens if it spreads though? And that the consequentialist argument in ethics would be, it doesn't fucking matter as long as the trash gets cleaned up. Right? Mm-hmm. As long as the trash is getting cleaned up, who cares about your own personal piety and your like moral kind of purity in the act? Who gives a fuck? As long as the trash is being cleaned up and we're no longer contaminating our environment. So those would be kind of just different ways of thinking through this. I have my own opinions on it, but I don't know. Like right now, at this stage of my life, I'm kind of more like, who gives a fuck as long as the shit gets done, you know?
Yeah.
But maybe that's not entirely right.
The idea of somebody picking up the can and doing it for the gram and putting it back down.
Well,
really
how is that
bothers
any
me.
different than just driving to Joshua Tree, getting an image of you like you're hiking, and then just going home, which happens all the time?
Well,
You're not actually
Well, I mean, the
hiking.
difference is,
Yeah,
are
the
you
difference.
creating some sort of social good in the activity?
Well, all I'm saying is that there's a simulation of an event happening here. You're not actually picking up the can. You're not actually climbing the mountain, because that's not what you came to do, perhaps. I don't
perhaps.
know.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is like, I don't know. Is that you guys know more about this than I do?
I
but
know
is that
nothing.
really
I'm
happening?
guessing.
Yeah, but is that really happening? Is it purely performative? First of all, who gives like what? This is like the movie The Favorite. Like, what game are we playing? Like, does it matter that you went on the hike or not? Like, is that going to create more global good?
Okay, well,
Maybe.
here's an example. Now, I'm kind of ruining this whole thing by bringing this up, but Wisecrack went to the LA Food Bank, and we did volunteer work, but we didn't post about it on Instagram. Why not? You run the Instagram. Why didn't you?
Yeah, I just figured like it was for us. I mean, I thought like it was a good for me. It
Exactly.
was like it was in a sense it was.
Now I'm
it felt
ruining
good-
the whole thing by
No.
talking about it now.
No, but it felt good it felt good to do something good, and we also had team building. We got to hang out and do something good together.
Yeah.
It was fun. It was very fun.
Yeah, it feels gross, but
Now-
trash tag was a trend. There was a whole that was different, I think, than just being purely promotive. That was a participation, maybe. I mean, I don't know.
But look, there was still like even in us volunteering at the food bank, there's still an exchange. There's still dopamine hits because it feels good. You'll know more about that. Like it feels good to go do that. It's team building, so the company benefits from us working more together. Like there's all these benefits. I mean, in a sense, like you're doing that work and there is an exchange, right? There's like a consideration, there's an exchange, and yeah, I'm not lying about that. That's there.
Yeah.
But but that's kind of in a sense a lot of the corporate social responsibility and a lot of companies going out and doing public good or donating to organizations.
Look at us.
There's always going to be an element of that, probably, unless you're Mother Teresa, maybe.
And even then,
No, but
you
even
know,
still, she
She did it all for
like,
herself.
for
That
sure.
selfish bitch.
Yeah, like
Well, she was. I mean, she was finding joy and she was serving God. So the Nietzschean criticism of her is that she was doing it as an instrumental means, not an end in itself. She was doing it in order to please God. So then she wasn't truly caring about the children. She was really just using them as an instrument for spirituality. So this is a really complex issue, and I don't know, but I don't think that we need to be so hard on ourselves because we get some sort of dopamine rush from serving people. And I think a lot of times people are like, oh, just because you're feeling good about yourself, then that contaminates your intentions. And I'm not sure. I think we're far more complex creatures, and I don't think that we should beat ourselves up for deriving joy from helping other people.
You're right. And Francis Ungria is saying I should please return to the Elizabeth Holmes fake deep voice. So for the rest of this podcast, I'm going to try to hold it because I'll be a good performer.
Okay. All right. We're going to do one more voicemail, one more email. Should we do Office Space or Flat Earth?
I think we should do Office Space first because we're talking about offices.
All right. So this is from Josh.
Hey guys, this is Josh.
This one's
out of
3 minutes.
Nashville.
Oh.
I just finished listening to the Office Space episode. You guys are, I'm a huge fan of you guys. I'm so thankful for your intelligent review of film, both high-minded and low-minded. But I wanted to share a thought I had. You guys were talking about properly motivating people in a company and how managers get it wrong. And so I'm actually MC
Hammer.
I hate the term entrepreneur. It sounds so wanky, but I am an entrepreneur.
Oh, very appropriate.
And I do employ people here in Nashville. And I kind of this is kind of my theory. I'd love your thought on it, especially would love Austin's thought on this. Basically, I kind of see motivation, or I see work I see multiple currencies. People tend to think in terms of money, like how much do I make per year? How much do I make per hour? Especially in the service industry. And what they should be thinking about, and how managers and employees should be thinking, is there actually are multiple currencies. There's money, there's time, there's other benefits or other compensations. There's stress, there's meaning, there's autonomy, and there's security. So who is making more money? The person in rural Arizona making $40,000 a year, working 40 hours a week with high security, low autonomy, low cost of living and benefits, or is it the high powered lawyer making $150,000 a year in Manhattan who has to work 80 hours a week and has a lot of stress and a lot of autonomy, but a lot of but low security? Or is it the person raising $30,000 a year just to get by while he digs wells in Africa, who is doing something meaningful to him, but he has no job security, no benefits? Who's actually making more money? And the answer is, well, it depends on the person. And unfortunately, companies love to talk about benefits and money, but never quite talk about time or the sense of autonomy you might have, or ability to make your own decisions on the job. And all these things are currencies that we trade in, and we trade one for the other. And if managers started thinking more like that, almost like a scoring system, this job ranks 7 in security and 5 in benefits and 8 in money and 4 in time. I don't know. If people started thinking more like that, they would make better decisions with their careers, and managers would know how to motivate.
It actually just cuts off there. I didn't cut him off.
Oh, wow. Well, okay.
I think he was going to say how to motivate people better. It sounded like it, but it was
Thanks for the voicemail.
to finish.
Sorry, thanks for the voicemail. God, I completely forgot. I'm so sorry.
Dude, can you imagine Elizabeth Holmes? She never
No.
forgets.
She never
Yeah.
She never let it slip.
She was
I've
always
heard it
on.
slip. I've heard it slip and then her correct herself.
There
in the
was a
middle of her
slip,
talk.
and it's mentioned in the John Kerry book.
Excuse me.
Okay, anyway, back to Josh's question. So, Austin, he specifically wanted to hear your thoughts, so let's hear it.
I mean, just very shortly, there are psychological experiments that demonstrate that sort of like negative reinforcement doesn't actually produce the type of motivation that positive reinforcement does. And so one of the things that sounds like that what Josh is indicating is that there are ways to positively motivate and to reinforce employees. But rather than just through like a system of rewards, like if you work harder, I will give you more money, but it's more about trying to figure out how is it do we attach ourselves to the larger social sphere as we realize the value or the meaning that we are kind of producing or taking part in within our daily labor. The problem is that under the current system, and I know that it seemed to be just this like boring anti-capitalist, but you have to remember capitalism is great in terms of producing wealth, but at the same time, it doesn't like solve all of our social ills like so many people want to argue that it does. And this is one of the things that you find at the beginning of Adam Smith's book on Wealth of Nations, where he talks about the division of labor. And then Marx spends a lot of time with the division of labor and capital. And then even people like Emile Durkheim, who's a sociologist from the 20th century, or 19th, 20th century, who talks a lot about this as well. With the idea that what happens, like what are the consequences of when you de-skill labor and you just become a worker that is just either working for money or that is performing sort of like a sort of trivial, repetitive task? In what way does that like alienate you from these other potential spheres of meaning that ought to define the human experience? And from my perspective, I think Josh is right that there are ways to motivate people that would move us beyond the reduction of social life and human life that occurs under the capitalist division of labor. The question is, how do you do that within a capitalist framework? And so you get a lot of people like Jeremy Rifkin, who talks about like the post-capitalist society through technology and through becoming like an entrepreneur of the self and using these various like 3D printing technologies where you can just become your own sort of single entity business and just rely on the tools of automation and stuff like that. Will that get us to a more sort of human perspective on meaning and value and security and all these other things? I don't know. And then, real quick, the last thing I wanted to say for people listening, what he was talking about reminded me a lot of Tim Ferriss. Did you guys read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek?
I was thinking about the 4-Hour Workweek. I didn't read it, but I know of it. And yeah, that's
the idea. It's like who really is making more money, so to speak, or who is kind of having a more valuable existence? Is it the lawyer that's working 80 hours a week and making $100,000, or is it the person who works 4 hours a week making $40,000 but is able to travel and surf and spend time building meaningful relationships? The problem is what do we value as human beings? And I think that one of the things that we denigrate under contemporary late capitalist conditions is we denigrate social value. We denigrate community. We denigrate the pursuits of spirituality. Those things become less important. And I think that that does a disservice to what it means to be like a human participant.
Well said.
All right, so let's get one more question, but real quick, I want to shout out to Aaron. He sent us an email about the Flat Earth documentary. He pointed out that the Flat Earthers were watching Dark City about halfway through the documentary. I mentioned that I knew they were watching a movie, but I didn't know it was Dark City, and I have seen Dark City, and this is pretty smart. As Aaron says, Dark City is about a self-contained, domed, and flat world where everything is controlled by a shadowy, powerful group of people in the movie, in the case aliens, so it was very relevant that that's the movie that they were watching. But anyway, the last question for today before we sign off is from Kane. Kane says, I was just listening to the recent podcast on Behind the Curve, and I think an interesting aspect of the documentary that wasn't really mentioned is that the Flat Earther communities are using conspiracies to discredit some of the bigger players in the group. The guy who Mark says wants to be the king of the Flat Earthers regularly goes on live streams and podcasts to say that Mark works for the CIA and Warner Brothers and so on. Patricia Sear in particular gets a hard time for some of the members saying she's a man and having to show her birth certificate. Patricia says herself that she can't disprove the allegations against her and that she's the only one that really knows the truth. And he says, I think it's interesting. We'd like to hear your take on it. Kane, my take on it is that this is a good thing because this is the kind of things, this line that you wrote right here. Patricia Steer is having a hard time because, Patricia says she can't disprove the allegations against her and that she's the only one that really knows it. This is the same logic that the Flat Earthers use to suggest that the world is flat and to constantly basically put forward these questions that can't be falsified, at least quickly, before they ask like 70 million other questions. So there's even a part in the documentary where she almost gets it. She says something like, and then I think about how they're conspiratorial thinking. How do I know I'm not thinking conspiratorial like that? But I know I'm not. And you're just like, damn it, she almost got it. But I think that, if people keep hounding her like that, then maybe that light bulb will go off.
Yeah, she'll see it as that. She'll see it that way.
So I think that, I guess it's a good thing if it leads to some sort of a epiphany, but who knows? Did any of you guys watch that? I know I'm the only one who was actually here for that podcast.
I saw the film. I saw the Flat Earth documentary, Behind the Curve. I saw it. I thought it was fascinating.
I
was thinking, I was wondering, how is Jared going to approach this in the podcast? I know he's not a disrespectful person, so I was like, you're going to approach it with respect, and I think you did on the podcast.
I tried, but I said it's a conundrum, because even if you say, all right, guys, we need to approach these people with respect, that's already disparaging.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have a point.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were. It was damned if you do, damned if you
Can
don't.
you imagine
Yeah.
if, like, you know, like, all right, guy, Helen's on the podcast. Let's all be nice. Like, then that would be
I'm
just
sure
like
there was that
insulting.
before I got
No,
here.
it was
It's
not.
fine.
No,
That was
it
definitely.
not.
He
I'm
pulled me
just-
aside
I'm just
earlier.
kidding. Yeah.
Be nice.
Yeah, so that's a conundrum that I don't think there's an answer to.
Well,
But
that's we did it, guys. We changed the world, and many people are going to be naysayers, but we did it.
yeah. All right, guys, signing off. Where can we find you guys on the internet? Austin.
You can hit me up on Twitter, Austin_Hayden, Insta, AUS_HAY.
What's your
Do a philosophy
Finsta?
podcast. What's up?
What's your Finsta?
My Finsta is Foss. I don't know what it is.
It's Theranos.
It should be
I do a
faux
philosophy
Hayden.
podcast called Owls at Dawn that you can check out. So yeah, hit me up.
And Helen.
I guess I'm on Instagram. I mean, if you, it's at FLOERSH at Flourish. But if I don't respond to your messages, it's not because I don't want to. It's because I hate Instagram. So sorry. Ugh.
All right, and
I
Jacob
know.
and I, unless you want to plug anything.
We're Wisecrack, but you should check out Father of Woody on Instagram.
On Instagram.
You are about to get so many
upload
followers.
all the best dog pics on the internet.
I'm
It is a
babysitting
great
that muffin
Instagram.
man this weekend, and so I will be the surrogate father of Woody this weekend. And he's going to be scared by this
Ice
voice.
cream. What are you gonna do?
I'm taking him to Puppies and Pilates, or Puppies and Planks, I think it's called. So it's a nice festive time with the dogs.
Are you actually?
I am. I'm going to be exercising with the animal.
I don't think he's going to be very well behaved, but
That's
you know,
totally
it's-
fine. That's totally fine.
He's definitely not going to be planking with you guys.
I'll be
to see how
planking,
that
very
goes.
ladylike.
He's going to be begging for bacon. Anyway, guys. Wait, so are we not doing a podcast next week?
I think it's going to be on Wednesday. So when you're
Wednesday.
back, yes.
Okay, and are we doing Inglorious Bastards?
I think we might be doing. I had an idea.
Oh, are we doing Us?
Us? Yes, right. We're going to do
Okay,
Us.
so we're going to do the Jordan Peele movie Us. Hopefully, I'll have seen it by then next week, so be sure to tune in for that. And then the week after, I think we're going to do Inglorious Bastards.
Yes.
So that's it. Thank you guys so much for listening. You want to give us the Ryan shout?
Show me. What is it? Oh,
From Hollywood,
From
Cal-
Hollywood, California. This is Elizabeth Holmes.
Peace, guys.
Peace, everybody.